to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Present.
Alderwoman Ingrassia.
Present.
Alderwoman Tyus. Present. Alderwoman Green.
Present.
Alderwoman Martin.
Present.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Present.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Rice.
Present.
Alderman Todd. Present. And Chairman Ornowitz. 8 present, you have quorum.
I'd like to note the excused absence of the chairman. First order of business would be to approve the meeting minutes from the October 31st, 2019 hearing.
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the October 31st.
I'll entertain a second.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. I'm sorry, Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Martin.
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Alderman Todd. And Chairman Ornowitz. That's 8 aye votes.
Okay, today we have 2 bills before us, Board Bill number 140 and Board Bill 152, both of which I assume we have some members of the general public here to discuss. For those of you who don't already know or who haven't already, we are going to be taking public testimony today. If you would like to speak, please sign up. We have a sign-up sheet here. We will be taking testimony in a limited fashion. It's important for us to hear everyone in the room and to make room for everyone else to hear everyone else. So we'll ask that when someone's at the mic, you first come up and identify yourself. I'd like to have you identify not only your name, but if you're a resident of the city, what neighborhood you live in. You don't need to give us your address, but we are looking for residents of the city of St. Louis to identify themselves as such. And when somebody's at the mic, we ask that the rest of the audience please be respectful and keep quiet. We'll be limiting testimony today from the public to 3 minutes a person, just to make sure that we give everybody an ample time to talk and we make sure that we have time to vote on bills as appropriate today. With that, I'd like to ask the sponsoring alderwoman of the Board Bill number 140, Christina Gracia, to present us with 140 today.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I wanted to make sure before I started that you all received a copy of the committee substitute over the weekend and request that we can put it before us.
I did receive the bill, the committee substitute. I believe all members of the committee, by way of email, received that. And that should be what we have before us. With that, I'll take entertain a motion to put Board Bill 140 committee substitute before us.
I move that we put Board Bill 140 committee substitute in front of us.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingrassia.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin.
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Alderman Todd. Chairman Ornowitz. That's 8 aye votes.
With that,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Board Bill 140 committee substitute is a comprehensive look at our animal welfare laws here in the city of St. Louis. The co-sponsoring aldermen, Pam Boyd, Carol Howard, Jack Coatar, and I sat down with the health department and the city councilor's office, along with our attorney at the Board of Aldermen, and we are updating the parameters around pets being out in extreme cold and heat with respect to adding temperatures for when they should be out below or above a certain temperature in consultation with the Missouri State Vet and the veterinarians at the St. Louis Zoo, and also provides variance provision. If there are businesses that are popping up all over, I believe we have one in the city of St. Louis now and more who would like to come, but a restaurant bar concept with a dog park. So this would allow the health department to create a variance, allowing for those to be permitted appropriately through the health department. There's a ban on declawing cats, and then a provision to require dangerous dog signs be posted. And this is all in response to, I'm sure a number of you have received complaints or concerns from your constituents about all of these topics. So I'm happy to take questions, and I do have representatives from the health department here as well.
I'll entertain questions from the committee before hearing from the health department. Alderwoman Tyus?
I'd like to hear the health department first, so no questions at this time.
Alderwoman Green?
One clarification on, so page 7, where domesticated is added, I'm guessing that that is intended to ensure that this is not applicable to feral
Correct.
cats.
Yep,
Okay.
thank you for that
Thank you.
question.
Alderwoman,
No questions.
Alderwoman Navarro?
I have a question about the, thank you, I have a question about the declawing of cats, and if it's appropriate to wait until we have someone else testify, that's fine too. I guess my question, I've heard from some of my constituents who feel like they're able to take in cats that would otherwise be feral cats out killing birds and doing other things, because they have access to that procedure. And I'm just curious if, I don't know how many people are regularly kind of providing that service in terms of taking in feral cats, and I'm just curious what your response would be to those folks who would say, I'm no longer going to do this if I'm not able to take
Sure.
access that
I
procedure.
appreciate that question. That was not brought to my attention as a concern. A number of rescue groups did bring the declawing ban issue to my attention, and so I feel like people who are on the TNR task force in the city, St. Louis Feral Cat Outreach, Stray Haven, and another number of organizations are supportive of this effort. I think there's a lot of misinformation about what cat declawing actually is or does. It is basically the same thing as cutting off our fingers at the first bone. Cats and people all have 3 bones in their fingers. Their claws grow out of their bone and not skin like ours. And so it creates, and this is research-based, a number of, ongoing possibly issues with pain. Because it grows from the bone, there can be regrowth of the claws, and the ability of there to be other possibilities to curb that behavior is something that is found in research to be better for the cats and also people in the home.
Okay, thank you. And knowing that those rescue groups are supportive of this is helpful to me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderwoman Rice?
No questions.
Alderman Todd?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, with that,
If people have questions specifically for the health department, that's fine. They're just here in case people had questions that I could not answer.
do we have a presentation by the health department? Or
No, nothing formal.
I think members of the committee had anticipated hearing from the health department.
I'm sure they're happy, they're equipped and ready to talk about it, even though they didn't prepare a formal presentation.
Great, we'd love to hear from them. Thank you for joining us today. If you could identify yourself
will.
for the committee, we'd appreciate it.
Good morning. My name is Charles Pratt. I'm the Environmental Health Service Manager for the Department of Health. Under my umbrella is our animal care and control group.
Mr. Pratt, do you have anything you'd like to offer as far as the bill is concerned that would be helpful to the committee in deciding the fate of the bill?
Well, no, I do not. We went through this. We talked about it and met on it on a number of occasions. Last year, we had a number of complaints about animals in the cold weather, in the freezing weather, and we responded to those complaints, but we really didn't have anything that we could kind of rest on and enforce as far as the temperature range is. We do have that now, and that's why we introduced that into the bill, is so that we had a little bit, so that we had more authority to move on such things.
Mr. Pratt, do you know how many complaints the city received last year regarding animals and temperature?
Well, I don't know the exact number, but we received approximately 30, something like that. And generally, they were from certain areas, but we received approximately 30 complaints, and we investigated each and every one of them.
I'd like to entertain questions from the committee. Mr. Pratt? Alderwoman Ingrassia, can I go ahead and skip you? Okay, Alderwoman Tyus?
I have no questions. Well, I really do have questions about the dog park. Would that be you I would ask questions to, or is it
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
So I read here that it says because there's some innovative new dog park, I guess, establishment, is it a bar or something like that, that we're talking about changing our ordinance to allow them in certain instances. Can you kind of tell me what our current requirements are and what we're changing, please?
Yeah, we have requirements for dog parks that are pretty closed-in requirements. So there has to be a petition from the neighborhood. There has to be an inspection process. Parks is involved with it also to create the area in which animals are going to go. There has to be rules that people using that park have to comply with. The only difference between this and what we're talking about is this is a large complex that will have just about anything you need or anything you would want if you were a pet owner to get involved with. Kansas City has one that's very successful now. And these same folks, I believe, are wanting to bring this in. They're going to redevelop an area where that's an old commercial area that's kind of, not utilized as much as it could be, so it's going to be a positive thing. The problem is that we had strict rules that dog parks had to conform with. This particular outfit, I guess, could not come in here and build and create this animal facility because we didn't have any variance offerings for that.
And so the variances, would it only be in commercial areas, or would it also be in residential areas that would be granting this variance?
I think the variances would apply anywhere, but particularly for these larger complexes.
Okay, so then why wouldn't we just put them in the commercial area and leave them as is in the residential areas then?
Well, Janine, you want to answer that? Pardon.
I'm Janine Arraghi. I'm the Health Services Manager, too, for the Department of Health, Environmental Health Services. So what we're interested in with this variance allowance would give the Director of Health the ability to assess anyone who is proposing a variance to the current ordinance and determine whether it still meets the intent of the current ordinance requirements for time ranges and other regulations in the dog park. We would only grant a variance, or the director would only grant a variance, if the variance request still met the intent of the ordinance requirements that are in existence and would not create any kind of other problem in that particular neighborhood.
And so what is your interpretation of intent? And why I'm so concerned, because other people who decide what happens in my neighborhood, they don't ever have to address when it doesn't go that way. So the Board of Adjustment and BPS and all those people who give all these variances, they don't live there. And so what is your interpretation of what the original intent is, and how then would you decide if that met it or not?
So.
Why is it that you are doing it versus having an actual hearing?
Well, I think you make a good point, whether a hearing would be needed for a variance. But I think the current ordinance in the city code is pretty prescriptive. It's very detailed in terms of certain items. I'll just read a few of them, not to exhaust all of them. All dogs shall be currently rabies vaccinated, registered, and wearing the appropriate tag and/or held by the owner
Can you
while
hold on
in the
just a
park.
second, please?
That's very uplifting.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, too. I'll read that again.
Okay.
All dogs shall be currently rabies vaccinated, registered, and wearing the appropriate tag and/or held by the owner while in the park. That's probably an item we would not grant a variance to, because it's important that any animals that are participating in the dog park would be rabies vaccinated and registered with the city. No female dogs in estrus heat are allowed. Probably we wouldn't vary that either. So some of the things that this particular entity is asking to waive, there's a limitation on the hours. The park can only be open from 6 a.m. to 1 hour after sunset. So in this case, because they're in a setting where they would not be disturbing the neighborhood, the location is in an industrial area and close to transportation areas, busy city streets, we would grant a variance allowing them to be open for hours that were later than 1 hour after sunset. That's an example.
Okay, so then again, going back, then why wouldn't you just say this variance would only apply to those things zoned X or whatever, the zoning is leaving my head right now, but I know it's A, B, F, for family, C, D, and then neighborhood commercial. So where are we anticipating this one would be, and why don't we just exempt that out from it and not do everything?
I don't have an answer for that. I think that's something that the committee and the
And I'll look up the
Alderperson-
zoning things, because as I understand it, this is going to be in a very commercial.
Yeah, I would like to get a vote on the bill today, but if you have concerns about where they're going to be able to be placed, I'd be happy to do a floor substitute.
Well, my concerns are when the time somebody else starts to exempt out, because I've been keeping track of all the people from BPS and all the people who give all these exemptions to my neighborhood, and then they don't ever do anything and they don't have anything to put up with it. So if this is specifically for just one segment commercial, instead of changing the whole law that allows them to then come in and make indiscriminate allowances where they don't live and never will deal with it again, is that we just.
And that's not the intent, and so I'm happy to
Right.
add language or discuss with you after the hearing language.
Right, that, because, and I would just want to understand this, is this just specifically for this particular thing, or are we anticipating there will be others like it in different locations?
I mean, I can't ascertain how many private organizations are interested in doing something like this, but I would assume that there's only so many of them that the city could support.
Right.
Right.
And this is in a, do you know what it's zoned, the area that it's planning on going into?
There is a potential for one to go in, I think maybe in the 17th ward. I'm not sure where or what the zoning is there, and then there's one in Soulard.
Okay. And so, and can you just tell me about what we're talking about besides the dog park? Is it some other, what else is included?
It's typically, again, I don't know all of the nuances of the business, but it's typically a restaurant, bar, and dog park.
Okay. So I know in University City, I know they got a dog park, but there's no restaurant. It's right down the street from a restaurant, but there's nothing. So then you would be able to bring your dog and
The only other ordinance we have related to dog parks allows for private organizations to run dog parks and city parks.
Okay, and so the dog part of this would be that while people are eating, they could release their dog, or do they have to be with their dog when they're using the dog park?
I think that would be part of the variance. Yeah, I mean, the idea at most dog parks is that you're supposed to be keeping an eye on the dog that you bring with you.
Okay. Well, I can support this, but I don't want to see it changed in all areas. So like, I would not like to see this change in A, B, C, D, but if we're starting to get to F, neighborhood commercial or below, then to me, that's something that we could add pretty easy as to where we're going to allow them to do a variance.
I agree, and I'll definitely work with the health department and our attorney to create language like that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
No further questions, thank you.
I can answer a few more of those questions that you just had. So this dog park, the uniqueness about this one, or these type, is that not only is there a dog park, but there's also grooming facilities, training facilities, daycares for the dogs. Folks will be able to just have a whole experience there, or be able to, get involved with those other things. So technically, it's just a large business with a dog park.
Okay, so
Yeah.
then basically it is commercial, then
Yes,
we shouldn't
yes.
change everything. Okay, I have no further questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Green?
Thank you. Just have I guess, small question sort of about enforcement, particularly around the temperature for pets to be outside. So I get a lot of complaints about this from constituents. What is the best way for them to make a complaint? Through CSB, through calling animal control? And then what does that process look like to then follow up on that complaint?
Okay. Yes, the best way to get any kind of a response is through CSB. So if we can get folks going through CSB, we get those complaints. They're coded for emergencies, emergency type levels. So that would probably be one that's coded as a high priority, and we receive it. So what would happen is that we would investigate that, and what we're looking for is adequate provisions for any animal. Depending on what that animal is, of course, we're talking dogs and cats here, but mainly dogs in this winter situation. So we're looking for adequate provisions. So that means there's an adequate doghouse, there's an adequate food and water, the animal's healthy, has adequate health care, veterinarian care. So we would conduct an investigation and confirm that those things were there or were not there. And if they're not there, then we would go through our regular legal due process to either fine or work to remove the animal from a situation that would cause them harm.
Okay, and if you're investigating, do you require that the homeowner is there to give you access to the premises, or are you just investigating from, looking over a fence, or?
Investigation processes are all over the place. So,
Okay.
yeah, we try to make contact, because sometimes it's just simply making contact. The water bowl is frozen, I didn't know it was frozen. Well, you need to freshen that up, and you need to do something to eliminate the fact that if you're not out there with the animal, that the water doesn't freeze.
Right.
Those kind of things.
Okay.
So some of it could be verbal advice, but there are some situations where we will go through, regular due processes to remove animals if they're in a detrimental situation.
Okay. And is there an appeals process, or, so I know, like last year, the year before, I had a constituent who came home to, a tag on their door, kind of citing them for having an animal outside when it was cold. The person had a dog door, and so, but the inspector couldn't see that and didn't realize that if the dog was out there, he was out there because he wanted to be out there.
Well, there might be some confusion there, because if there's a tag on the door, that's just a notice
Okay.
that somebody was there and wanting to contact someone. We don't.
Won't just put a
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, we don't post
Okay.
fines and penalties on doors. Usually that tag just means somebody's there to connect with you so that
Okay.
you can, discuss what's going on.
And
the
then they would
complaint.
call and set up that time for you to
Yep.
come and investigate.
Exactly.
Okay, that is
Exactly
helpful.
what that is.
Alderwoman Martin?
I just
Oh,
want to
waivers.
add one thing to that, that after business hours, the Citizen Service Bureau may not be active. So the protocol is for someone who's concerned to call the non-emergency number to the police department. We have after-hours manager and animal control officers on duty who can respond after hours.
Okay, that is very good to know. Thank you.
Alderman Martin?
That actually is very good to know, because last night I was dealing with a situation with an animal, and I didn't know I could call that number, so I appreciate that. As far as the variance goes, I mean, the business, correct me if I'm wrong, the business would still have to go through the typical business licenses and variances, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Alderwoman Navarro?
No questions.
Alderwoman Rice?
Thank you so much. Just to speak to those types of establishments also, I've visited a number of those in other cities, and I think they're phenomenal, really fun areas to be. It's so generally sort of a dog park where a dog is running free, but under the supervision of an owner, that you're not supposed to lose track of your dog when you go into those situations. But then they're generally large facilities, so there are only so many places that they could go into, and I think important, like Alderwoman Martin noted, that in order for it to be a food preparation site, there or a
Has to be separated.
business, right? Well, it has to be separated, but also has to go through the Board of Adjustment if the zoning code requires that as well. So I think there's multiple checks that would come through on this. The health department is only one of a number of those. So I think we still could write something in the zoning ordinance about that, but there are multiple checks as we go through that. So and thank you so much for the specificity on the temperatures. That's helpful, especially as we have this unseasonably quick dip into low temperatures. So thank you so much for all of your work on this.
Well, thank you.
Alderman Todd?
Thank you. I don't have any questions.
Alderwoman Ingrassia, will you join us again? Mr. Pratt, thank you for being here today. Alderwoman Ingrassia, would you have any closing remarks or anything you'd like to add?
Nope, I don't. I would appreciate your support getting this out of committee today.
And my apologies, we do have one speaker who would like to speak on the issue. Amanda Good, are you in the audience? Okay. Amanda, if you could identify yourself and who you represent and where in this, whether or not you're a city
I'm
resident.
not a resident, is that okay?
Sure,
Okay,
yes.
sure. Good morning, my name is Amanda Good. I'm the Missouri State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. The Humane Society of the United States is the nation's largest animal protection organization, and we support passage of Board Bill 140, which would end the practice of declawing cats in the city of St. Louis. Convenience declawing of cats is already illegal in several major U.S. cities and the state of New York, with several other cities and states also considering similar proposals. Declawing is a medical procedure with serious implications that involves the amputation of the last bone of each toe. If performed on a human being, it would be similar to cutting off the finger at the last knuckle. It's an unnecessary surgery most often performed for convenience issues, such as to address problems like scratching of household furniture, and provides no medical benefit whatsoever to the cat. Declawing of cats is not fully condoned by any veterinary medical association. A multitude of veterinarians in the city, throughout the state, and around the country refuse to perform this procedure on ethical grounds, citing that it is an invasive convenience surgery. And as of 2013, the American Veterinary Medical Association condemned the declawing of wild or exotic cats due to the adverse health effects. The surgery can be extremely painful and may lead to lifelong health risks and complications, including behavioral abnormalities such as litter box aversion and increased biting. The conditions often lead to owner surrender of declawed cats and places financial burdens on already strained shelters and often the taxpayer. The other portion of the bill I'd like to address deals with the tethering of animals in extreme weather. Dogs across St. Louis are suffering from lack of very basic care and exposure to extreme temperatures. Well-defined terms establishing minimum standards are essential to combating animal suffering. So for that reason, we enthusiastically support the proposed ordinance that ensures dogs will be protected during the most extreme weather events. These inclusions will serve as an educational tool for pet owners about the minimal level of care they must provide, as well as make law enforcement less burdensome by providing criteria for determining when there is a violation. Last winter highlighted the need for additional protections during egregious weather as warnings were issued throughout Missouri and temperatures plummeted. St. Louis registered a low temperature of -6 degrees on January 30th. Even with an outdoor shelter, extended exposure to brutally cold temperatures can result in serious injury or death. It's a common misconception that dogs' fur enables them to withstand extreme cold better than humans. In fact, dogs of any breed who are exposed to extreme cold for a long period of time can and do suffer from hypothermia or death. Exposed skin like the nose, ears, and paw pads are highly susceptible to frostbite and can be permanently damaged. The AVMA recommends that dogs, even thick-coated Arctic breeds, should not be left outside during below freezing weather, and especially not without shelter that allows the dog to maintain a normal body temperature. So this ordinance will establish minimum common sense protection for dogs by ensuring they're not left outdoors or unattended below 32 degrees or above 93 degrees or during a severe weather warning. Using these guidelines will create clear objective expectations. The language in this ordinance is straightforward, enforceable, designed to solve a problem at hand, and reasonable for citizens to comply. On behalf of our members and supporters in St. Louis, the HSUS supports passage of this bill, a humane bill that will protect the health and well-being of family pets, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Good. Do we have any questions from the committee? Okay. With that, I thank you for taking your time to come up to the City of St. Louis today. Alderman Ingrassia, I just have a couple of questions about enforcement, if you don't mind. With regards to the declawing, is the onus on the veterinarian or the citizen requesting such a service? And what is the fine associated with violating this?
Sure. It's on the onus of the veterinarian. I am working with a national nonprofit called the Paw Project, and they are going to help the city make sure that all the vets in the city of St. Louis are aware that the ordinance goes into place, and then follow up with any sort of concerns or problems they may have. And I apologize, I brought up the wrong information. Does somebody have a copy of the board bill I can look at really quickly, or do you mind if I grab mine?
I have it right here.
Thank you. I guess we didn't put any, is this the committee substitute? We didn't put any enforcement mechanisms in because they're already addressed in the ordinances from the health department. Janine, can you speak to that? I think they're already addressed elsewhere.
If we could address that, and the follow-up question I had was with regards to the, the first provision, the weather-related, and just what the enforcement mechanism on that would be.
We actually have two routes that we can pursue with regard to enforcement. It can be referred to the municipal court, or if it's, actually there's a third one, if it's a violation of state code, we can also ask our municipal court to refer it to the circuit court. We also have the ability to assess administrative citation fines as well.
And those would be, the state code would pertain to?
Abuse and neglect,
I
right.
gotcha. And the fines associated with these things are spelled out?
Yes, there's a code for our administrative citation fines. I don't recall the ordinance number.
If you don't mind, it would be helpful just maybe before we move forward, we can vote on this bill today, but if we could have that information, it would be helpful for folks to be able to discuss with the public.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any closing remarks? Any further questions from the committee?
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Seeing no additional questions from the committee, I'll entertain a motion on Board Bill 140.
I move that we pass Board Bill 140 out with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, 140 committee substitutes with, do we need to vote on the committee substitute, or can we just pass, if we could just pass this out?
I'm entertaining a motion on Board Bill 140 committee substitute for clarification.
Then I move that we pass Board Bill 140 committee substitute out with a due pass recommendation.
Second. Previous roll.
Is there, hearing no objection, Board Bill 140 committee substitute passes with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll move on to Alderwoman Ingrassia's second bill, Board Bill 152.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Board Bill 152 is a board bill that would prohibit medical and mental health care providers from providing conversion therapy to minors in the city of St. Louis. And there's no scientifically valid evidence that supports the practice of conversion therapy. In fact, there are a number of mental health and medical organizations that have come out against it, including the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the American School Counselor Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the National Association of Social Workers, the American Counseling Association, the American Psychoanalytic Association, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and the Pan American Health Organization. We would be following suit with Columbia, Missouri, and a board bill that's making its way through the Kansas City Council as well right now, in addition to a number of states and Washington, D.C. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Start with members of the committee. Alderwoman Tyus.
No questions. Just a comment. Thank you for this board bill.
You're welcome.
Alderwoman Green. No questions. Alderwoman Martin.
No questions.
Alderwoman Navarro.
No questions.
Alderwoman Bryce.
No questions.
Alderman Todd.
No question.
Okay. Alderman, do you have any members any folks that you want to officially be presenting here today with you on
Yes.
behalf of the bill, as opposed to speaking as a member of the general public?
Yes, there's a representative from Promo I would like to have come up.
Okay. If you don't mind, please identify yourself to the committee.
Absolutely. So my name is Caitlin Cavey, and I'm the statewide field coordinator for PROMO, which is Missouri's LGBTQ advocacy organization. I reside in Clifton Heights, so I'm a city resident, and our organization is on Gravois in the city as well. So thank you, first of all, for St. Louis for being one of 3 cities in Missouri working to pass a conversion therapy ban. Statewide, Representative Tracy McCreary sponsors a bill to ban this harmful, dangerous, draconian practice, but it has not passed yet. Thank you also to everyone who is here this morning. These ordinances are most effective because of public testimony and education, and your time and energy are critically important. I'm thrilled to say that 18 states and Washington, D.C., as well as dozens of U.S. cities, have passed conversion therapy bans, and I look forward to St. Louis joining those states in support. So to begin, yes, this so-called practice does happen in Missouri. A 2019 study found that nearly 700,000 LGBT adults alive today have experienced this in their life, and about half of them received it as children. But conversion therapy doesn't work. Instead, it harms children. No credible scientific study has ever shown this therapy to work. So, as the organizations were stated by Alderwoman Ingrassia, there are numerous medical organizations that have come out against conversion therapy. Additionally, people, especially children and teenagers who are subjected to this practice and other forms of rejection, are far more likely to attempt suicide, to engage in self-harming behaviors, or experience depression and other negative mental health effects. One of the most important things for protecting and promoting the health of LGBTQ youth is family and community acceptance. Recent research showed that LGBTQ youth who report having at least one accepting adult in their life were 40% less likely to attempt suicide. A 2018 peer-reviewed study by Dr. Caitlin Ryan found that LGBTQ youth who were subjected to conversion therapy were more than 3 times more likely to attempt suicide than LGBTQ youth who are not subjected to conversion therapy. And a 2019 study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that transgender people who were subjected to conversion therapy as children were 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than other transgender people. With today's vote, you have the opportunity to affirm once again that being LGBTQ is not a disorder, a disease, an illness, a deficiency, or a shortcoming. Instead, being LGBTQ is something to be proud of, celebrated, and protected. The vote you take this morning doesn't just ban the practice here in St. Louis and move it from committee. It sends the message to the parents and loved ones all across the country of LGBTQ people that they are perfect just the way they are. That message is truly life-saving. So thank you for the time today and for the opportunity to testify against the dangerous practice of conversion therapy. The St. Louis Board of Aldermen can be a leader not only to local residents, but to the entire state by sending a clear message of support to our LGBTQ youth. I urge the council to unanimously pass this measure out of committee and protect our community, our youth, and our future. And I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
I'll entertain questions from the committee. Do we have any? All right, I'll go down the list. Alderwoman Tyus?
So I'm a member of 32 first cousins, and one of my cousins is openly gay, and one of them died because he was not openly gay, and he had to hide his sexuality. I don't even think that, so I want to say I don't even think it's a celebration. It just is. That's what, you practice it just like you practice being non-gay or any of the other things. It just is, and anybody who can't get over it needs to get over it, okay? So my question would be, though, in this, because I know sometimes churches sometimes engage in this, so would this affect churches? Because that's what I'm going to have to answer.
Yes, so it's really important to note here that religion and freedom of religion is an important American value, which is why it's already protected by the First Amendment of our Constitution.
Okay, I knew that, but I just wanted to make that clear. So again, thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Green? No questions. Alderwoman Martin?
No questions.
Alderwoman Navarro? Alderwoman Rice?
No questions, but thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Alderman, okay. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll open it up to public testimony. I'm going to start alongside of the sign-in sheet. With the pro side, we'll go back and forth. It looks like we have more folks here on the con side, so we'll end up there. But again, when I call your name, if you could come up, identify yourself to the committee and for our record, as well as where you reside in the city of St. Louis. And I'll start with Jill. I apologize, I'm unable to read your last name. Hall.
Good morning.
Excuse me, what? Jill?
Jill All, A-U-L.
All. Welcome.
Hi. I live in St. Charles County,
Okay.
and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the founder and president of the St. Charles Pflag chapter. Pflag is a 50-year-old national network of more than 450 support groups for parents of LGBT children. Our chapter has been meeting monthly for the past 14 and a half years. And throughout all of that time, I've had the opportunity to meet hundreds of people and hear countless stories about all kinds of experiences. And many of these include survival stories about conversion therapy. 3 people I know who are survivors have asked me to share their stories with you today. The first comes from Dan, a 69-year-old gay man. As Dan thinks back on the experience of being forced into conversion therapy at the age of 12 throughout the summer of 1962, he remembers how badly he wanted to participate. He says he would have done anything to get his parents to love him again and to get God to love him again. He remembers sitting with his parents in the so-called doctor's office. He had an instrument that was strapped onto his fingers. The doctor had Dan's parents try it out to feel the currents, the electric currents that it provided. It was a minor but slightly unpleasant shock. The doctor explained how Dan would be shown pictures, and anytime there was an exposed man, he would receive an unpleasant tingle. Dan's parents were told to drop him off and come back and pick him up. They were also told that a nurse would always be there during his treatments, but there never was, not once. The shocking instrument was never used on Dan's fingers. It was used on his genitals. The pain was so much more intense that he would often vomit from the shocks. The doctor told him that if he were to stay queer, he would have to learn to love this pain. He was told that his reaction to that pain was how God was reacting to him being gay. As a 12-year-old child, Dan had no idea what being gay even meant. He thought he was afflicted with some sort of dreaded disease and that he was the only person in the world so afflicted. Now, at 69 years old, he still suffers the ramifications. He's been through therapy for years, and he still feels like it's harming him now. The next story comes from William, who is a 40-year-old gay man. When William was 16 and just coming to terms with his sexuality, his parents forced him to participate in conversion therapy for 5 years. In his case, there was no physical abuse. However, misguided psychological advice harmed him and his family. For 5 years, William tried over and over to not be himself. He believes now that his parents and the conversion therapist acted out of care and with integrity in hopes that it would help him develop into a mentally healthy straight man. Instead, it did just the opposite. He feels like he was robbed of his adolescence. By the time it stopped and he was in his 20s, he had missed out on the typical experiences that a teenager has, figuring out how to navigate the world of dating, self-expression, and identity. He emerged from that experience as a smart, educated, but severely naive and psychologically underdeveloped gay man who, even at 40, is still suffering its effects. And the third and final story is from Curtis, who is a gay 25-year-old man. Curtis's parents took him to conversion therapy when he was 14 years old because they suspected that he was gay. As the sessions took place over the course of a year, he developed symptoms of severe anxiety and depression. His grades plummeted, and he became suicidal. Fortunately, his parents educated themselves in time and came around to accepting him for who he is, and Curtis now runs a nonprofit for conversion therapy survivors. I urge you, on behalf of these 3 survivors and the 20,000 young people subjected to this harmful and unsuccessful practice each year, to pass this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. Now we'll have Bev Aylen.
Mr. Chairman, it's very difficult to hear. That maybe we're not supposed to, but it's very difficult to understand what anybody's saying. Can the sound be increased?
Just make, if you don't mind speaking in the microphone. We have hearings at people, we heard you very well.
I got some printouts here too. Okay, next.
You can adjust the microphone so that the audience can hear you better.
Hi, my name is Bev Aylen. I'm the State Director for Concerned Women for America, Missouri. And on behalf of the 194 members we have living in the city of St. Louis, I'm here to oppose Board Bill 152. Okay, whoops. Got to get a bigger font here. This is a one-sided ban. This reeks of unconstitutionality. There are lawsuits across the country on bans like these. This ordinance will be challenged. The city of St. Louis should not be ready and willing to spend taxpayer dollars to defend such a lawsuit. Line 11, page 1 acknowledges the professional organizations which support such a ban. However, there are many professional organizations which support the practice of conversion therapy. The American College of Pediatricians, the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, Christian Medical and Dental Association, Catholic Medical Association, International Federation for Therapeutic and Counseling Choice, International Federation of Catholic Medical Associations, Alliance for Therapeutic Choice, and International Network of Orthodox Jew Mental Health Professionals. Line 15, page 1, says there is no evidence that conversion therapy is effective or that an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity can be changed by conversion therapy. There's no consensus on that. What Bill 152 does is use the strong arm of civil government dictating to its citizens what they can and can't think. There are hundreds of therapists and counselors across the country, and there's at least one in this room who would say differently because in their practices, they have seen young people work through their unwanted same-sex attractions or gender confusion to walk in the fullness that they desired. I know many legitimate therapists, ministries who provide excellent therapy, and there are many individuals who have been helped and could testify to that fact. We all are horrified at some of the examples that were given earlier on that, but the ministries and the therapists that I know did not practice those. Line 7, page 2, states that the city of St. Louis has a responsibility to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens. Actually, the role of the civil government is to protect the life, liberty, and property of the people. This ban infringes on the liberty plus the intellectual property of the individual. The bill goes on to clarify that conversion therapy shall not include counseling that provides support and assistance to the person undergoing gender transition. Well, LBGTQ, the Q stands for questioning. The city of St. Louis is about to end all questioning by answering it for the minor. Only support of same-sex attractions or gender transitioning will be offered. That is the only path. The city of St. Louis seeks to take away the choice for the individual minor. I know of no movement to limit therapy who are working out their same-sex attractions or gender identity to that would not embrace or affirm same-sex attractions. This is all one-sided. Plus, this bill is an affront to parents' rights. It takes away the opportunity for parents to seek professional help for a child who's struggling with same-sex attractions or gender identity. And that would support their deeply held beliefs. Section 4, page 5, outlines the procedure for complaints, which is very good, but where are the formal complaints regarding the therapist? I would hope that those individuals that have experienced unpleasant, horrific practices that have been outlined today and in other instances would complain to the proper authorities and charges be brought against those therapists for unethical practices. Nothing is more important, nothing is more intimate, more private, and more sensitive than a growing young man or woman talking to a mental health therapist about sex, gender, preferences, and conflicted feelings. BB 152 inserts the city's code enforcers into the middle of this sensitive, intense, and private moment. Minors who are dealing with same-sex attractions or questions about their gender need the therapy that best suits them, their choice. Civil government office holders have no authority to deny people the freedom to find counseling and resources to help them find happiness. Please table Board Bill 152. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. From the pro side, we have James Croft from the Ethical Society of St. Louis.
Good morning. I'm James Croft. I'm clergy for the Ethical Society of St. Louis. I am a St. Louis City resident. I live in the Central West End, and I hold an MA in Education from Cambridge, a Master's in Education, and a Doctorate in Human Development from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I didn't undergo conversion therapy myself, but over the past 12 years that I've lived in the USA, I've come to know and love many people who have gone through this ordeal, and I am here for them today. I say so-called conversion therapy because what we're discussing here is not therapy, and it does not successfully convert anybody. We know this because every major medical and psychological association in the USA and around the world has repudiated this practice, while some have recognized it formally as a form of abuse. We know this too because multiple high-profile former practitioners have themselves repudiated their own work, offering statements of regret and repentance to the LGBTQIA+ community. Conversion therapy is, from my perspective as an expert in healthy human development, nothing less than the psychological and sometimes physical torture of children. I support Board Bill 152 quite simply because I'm against child abuse. I believe, as I hope we all believe, that the protection of children is a sacred trust, one of the most sacred duties of any society, and the trust we place in healthcare practitioners to do no harm to our children is also a sacred trust. And so-called conversion therapy undermines that trust by allowing practitioners to abuse children at a time when they are most vulnerable. No civilized society should allow this. I want to leave you with one final thought. Those friends of mine who have endured and overcome this horrific process do not say that they were in therapy. They do not call themselves patients. On the internet message boards and Facebook pages and support groups where they find each other, they use just one word to describe their experience. They are survivors. Like rape survivors or domestic violence survivors. And like all survivors, my friends carry the scars of this grotesque and wicked practice with them every day, and they will do for the rest of their lives. It damages their psychological health, it damages their relationship with their family, it damages their romantic lives. Not one more child should have to survive so-called conversion therapy. Let us end it now.
Thank you, James. Now we'll have Harold Hendricks.
I'm Harold Hendrick. I live in North County, well, a little wobbly, sorry. I pastored 3 churches, a total of 27 years, 9-year average. I'm very concerned about this legislation. I had a cousin, a young cousin, the son of my first cousin, who was involved in the lifestyle for years and then contracted AIDS, and then he lived another 25 years on like the Walking Dead, taking pills to stay alive. The concern is that while this effort makes it more likely that had he lived under this legislation, he would have not received full disclosure about the dangers, such as a proliferation of sexually transmitted diseases, such as the fact that most who have attempted to give blood to the Red Cross in the past years, unless they've modified, they won't take it. And then we have the stories, endless stories of 10, 20 years off the life of those who are in the lifestyle. Now, I am a pastor, and probably most of you go to church, and your church probably stands on the Word of God. Note these passages. Genesis 19, God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of rampant homosexuality. In Leviticus 20:13, the law of Moses says that a man is not to lie with a man like a man lies with a woman. That was a death sentence. In Romans, the last part of the chapter, great warnings go against the practice of homosexuality. And then in 1 Corinthians 6, there's wonderful news. Paul, inspired of God, lists a range of evil practices, saying they're not going to be in the kingdom of God. But he says further, that's what some of you were. You were in these wicked lifestyles, and the practice of homosexuality is listed, but they were forgiven and they were changed. And we cannot ignore, with so many involved in churches and ministry in the St. Louis region, that reality that we can find all these exceptions. I urge you and invite you in closing to go to my website. Did I say I was with Bot Radio, doing talk radio part-time for 32 years? And I have a website that deals in part with the subject today. That's haroldhendrick.com, my name, haroldhendrick.com. This is going to be challenged. Already in New York City, they are slowing down the efforts to move forward with this, and in Tampa, a judge has already ruled against it because of the taking away of people's being able to get full disclosure on subjects in which they are very interested. You cannot cut off free speech and call it a democratically asserted legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harold.
Yes.
Next, we have Jim Venice.
Madam Chair, Board of Aldermen, committee members, my name is Jim Venice. I'm here today to respectfully address you concerning the proposed ban on conversion therapy for minors. My wife of 33 years and I were raised here in the St. Louis City and region. We run a Christian counseling ministry that started in 2002 called Pure Heart Ministries. The ministry focuses on helping individuals and their families that have been impacted by a spectrum of sexual abuses and sexual addictions. We specialize in helping those who deal with unwanted same-gender confusion or LGBT issues. We have successfully helped hundreds of men and women walk away from homosexuality and lesbianism with consistent and predictable results. Contrary to our popular culture, not everyone who struggles with gender confusion wants to embrace those identities. Most who come to us are desperate to find a way out and are filled with hope and eagerly choose to walk away from their gender confusion. I am uniquely qualified to help these individuals because this is also part of my story. I too struggled with unwanted same-gender attractions as a young person, and for several years I bought into the lie that I was born gay, that I had gay genes and had no choice but to embrace homosexuality. I was devastated and even depressed by the idea that I had no choice in this matter. In 1996, I had a life-changing encounter with the Lord Jesus Christ that caused me to immediately be in conflict with my gay lifestyle. I quickly learned that there were legitimate, unmet needs and deep, unresolved issues in my past that fueled those attractions, and that those unmet needs could be successfully dealt with, and that the attractions would then start to subside and eventually go away. I may not be the most convincing form of masculine heterosexuality, but after several years of walking this out in obedience to the Lordship of Jesus Christ and to the Holy Bible, I am no longer a gay man. This has happened in my life and has for several hundred to whom we have ministered, as well as many countless thousands across the country and around the world. We are not here to force people to change. We do not stand on street corners in front of gay bars yelling "turn or burn." We do not hate gay people. In fact, we truly love them and want them to know that there is a way out if they were to so choose. We do not counsel minors without their parent or guardian being present, and we do not allow parents to force their minors to come against their will. Although we don't embrace or support homosexuality, we do support their right to choose that lifestyle. Likewise, we want to protect everyone's right to choose otherwise and to be able to find help from trained professionals. You may be surprised to learn that just as there are a list of organizations who support this ban, there is an equally impressive list of professional mental health organizations who do not. There is no consensus among professional mental health organizations that conversion therapy is harmful for minors or adults. This ban would leave St. Louis minors and their parents with inaccurate information, taking away their choice in determining their sexual orientation. You're not only removing their right to self-determination, you're also removing their right to consult trained professionals who can assist them with their choice. The passing of this bill would make it even harder for parents to find help for their struggling sons or daughters. Why not support the choice of minors and their parents to not embrace gender confusion? We know that similar bills have been passed across the country. There are lawsuits pending against many of these bans. The New York City Council has recently voted to repeal their ban because they fear that the U.S. Supreme Court will reverse it. One such ban was overturned by a federal judge recently in Tampa, Florida. These bans violate the counselee and the counselor's right to freedom of association and freedom of speech in the counseling room. In the words of one of my mentors and author, Andy Kaminsky, why should the LGBT freedom to morph into whatever gender variation one wants bar persons who understand freedom differently? Why should persons who want to be reconciled to their biological gender or to overcome same-sex attractions be denied good psychological care? The term conversion therapy has become a boogeyman argument designed to hide the agenda driving the bill. Walk our LGBT way or the highway, or in this case, to jail. I respectfully ask you to please consider the long-reaching consequences to the minors in St. Louis and their families who will negatively be affected by this proposed ban. Consider the many professionals and their livelihoods and financial ruin and their families that will be affected. Please put my face on this bill and ask yourselves, does Reverend Venice deserve to be punished by fines that would devastate his family's finances and even jail or prison time for helping parents with their gender-confused sons or daughters? Thank you for this opportunity to address you.
Mr. Venice,
Yes, ma'am.
did your letter here, your zip code is located in O'Fallon, Missouri. Do you live in the city of
It's
St.
actually,
Louis?
our zip code for our mailing address is P.O. Box in St. Peters, Missouri.
Okay. Do you live in the city of St. Louis?
I do not. I live in St. Charles.
Okay. Thank you for being here today. In the interest
But many of the people that I work with come from the city of St. Louis, and I'm here to protect their right to choose alternatives to embracing homosexuality and to choose to find health professionals who can help
We do appreciate
them.
you being here today. We're going to have to limit testimony to 3 minutes moving forward, just in the interest of time to make sure that we can get through everybody here today.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Ruby Casino. Ruby, if you could identify yourself and let us know if you're a city resident.
Yes, I'm Ruby Casino. I'm a practicing pediatrician at the Watson area, and most of my catchment areas are living in the city of St. Louis.
And Ruby,
I live in Chesterfield, though.
You live in Chesterfield. Okay, thank you for adding that to our record.
Yes. But as I've said, my practice is over at Watson, which is in the city of St. Louis. As a practicing pediatrician and a fellow of the American Academy of Pediatrics, I'm one of the, I would say, the minority who is definitely against the ban for the conversion therapy. As pediatrician, we have developmental stages, mentally, psychosocially, and then, of course, physically. I would rather that the children be given the chance at the age of their legal maturity, to decide for themselves and not as a minor. When asked about the transgenderism or the endocrine intervention at WashU, where I graduated from my residency, originally I'm from the Philippines and I'm a legal migrant to the States. I asked them, do you do any DNA or chromosomal analysis on those patients that you give even pubertal hormonal suppression? Do you do a DNA? And, human chromosomes, we have 46, and the sex chromosomes is XX and XY. They said no. So gender identity, and that's another thing, gender identity, gender expression, gender dysphoria, that's the gender confusion, okay? We all undergo certain changes in our life, and you know that. Am I this and all? Am I attracted to this female? But do you express it? Do you? When I was young, I don't like dolls. I love guns and something which is, But when I go to church, I want to wear a dress. I want to wear my petticoats. But I know that I'm a woman because I know my private genitalia, which identifies me as such. And therefore, the suppression and the media or other things, may really affect the children. And so parental rights and the rights of the minority, if we have alcoholism, alcohol usage at 21, legal age of, at 18, we have to defer. And we can, in the process of growth and development, we have to open our options to conversion therapy, or probably a different name, transitional or something. Thank you.
Thank you. Amina Hasanovic. Thank you, Amina. Diana Kaufman.
I'm Diana Kaufman. I'm a resident of Chesterfield, Missouri, and I am here, if this is acceptable, to give you the testimony of Andrew Kaminsky. He is a Kansas City resident, and he's the founder and director of Desert Stream Ministries. Dear members of the Health and Human Services Committee, Bill 152 fortifies choice for persons who, for reasons of conscience, do not agree with LGBT approach to determining a moral and psychological course for their lives. I trust we can agree on the value of choice. All persons, minor included, should be free to explore options other than once gay, always gay, or gender is a state of mind, go ahead and do irreparable damage to your biologically gendered body. I just received an email from a young man who surgically and chemically feminized his body and now regrets that decision. He wants desperately to be reconciled to his birth gender. If this ordinance passes, one would not be free to explore the option to address their same-sex attractions or gender identity concerns on the grounds that it challenges his gender expression. But what if one wants to challenge their feelings? What if a minor decides to go against the grain of the culture and follow what for him is a more fruitful path? The ordinance raises up the straw man of dangerous, coercive conversion therapy, when in truth it may be in the best interest of that young person to secure therapeutic alliance with a helper who helps him or her become reconciled to birth gender and the prospect of normal opposite gender relating. A brief word on my own story, and this is his words, this is not mine. I was raised by psychologist parents who could not have been more loving and releasing of their kids. For a variety of reasons, I experienced same-sex attraction and rather quickly began to act them out in the sunny, shameless beach town where I grew up in Southern California. Early homosexual experiences in high school and university revealed a kind of brokenness, objectifying of men being objectified. I began to long for the kind, stable, faithful life modeled by my parents. A kind of moral guilt arose in me that I had never experienced before.
Diana, we're coming on the end of our 3 minutes. Do you have written testimony you'd like to share with the committee?
I could leave this. I only have one copy.
Feel free to leave that. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Carol Lieberman of Wildwood, Missouri. I've got the timer going here. Okay, Carol, do you have a Carol Lieberman of Wildwood? Correct. Okay, Carol?
Hello. I don't have much to add to everything everyone's already said, except from a parent's perspective, as a mother of a child who has experienced same-sex attractions, I'm very afraid if he would not be able to get any counseling because he struggles with guilt and he's not happy with that situation. And so many others in his group say, well, we would never choose this. We would never choose this. That was many years ago, but now things have changed, and it's like, well, God made us this way. And I see that it's more activism than actually trying to help the child to develop in a heterosexual way. A heterosexual way is more optimal for raising children and for a lifetime. And there are many people in this book says that they did a survey of 1,200 people who had gone through this type of therapy, and 70% of them who were dealing with same-sex attractions were helped and also had fewer same-sex desires and were found lasting freedom. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of stumbling over my words because what I wrote, anyway. I just feel like parents and those who want their children to develop a normal heterosexuality are kind of demonized in this legislation. And,
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for coming in
okay,
today.
well, thank you.
Is there a Carrie Cook from Baldwin, Missouri? Hi, Carrie.
Hi,
Welcome to the city.
thank you. My experience, observation, and research since coming out as a lesbian at the age of 19 gives me reason to oppose Board Bill number 152. Of the hundreds of teens and young adults I have known who identified as gay, lesbian, or transgender, I have never met one who had a negative experience from efforts to embrace heterosexual or birth gender. I was a homeless, runaway 17-year-old at risk of suicide. The counseling available offered both pathways. I chose the lesbian one. I ask that you give the teens of St. Louis City the same choice I had. Some will go ahead with what feels right or natural. Others will want to explore the many possible experiences, images, or thoughts that may have come together to make homosexuality or transgender feel right or natural at the time. I wasn't ready to go on a journey into my past with a therapist until I had already lived about 10 years as a lesbian. My terminally ill Catholic lesbian partner suggested we find out if there was a way for us to change. It was dangerous for her mental and physical well-being to believe that there was no way to change. I went looking for help to change, and I found counselors with loving guidance towards emotional maturity that would equip me to understand myself better and what it would take to be a wife to a man. Please give the teens of St. Louis freedom to choose, not a helicopter parent bill. No matter how strongly a teen feels right now that they are really, really LGBT, they deserve to know that a former Sydney Gay and Lesbian Rights Lobby board member is one of the many who are now peacefully and uniquely heterosexual. What if this bill is based on anxiety and misinformation? What if teens get into their 20s, more logic than emotion kicks in? They may then be glad that you chose to let go of the hovering helicopter bill and trust them enough to see both sides and choose. I have 2 teenagers, so I read books on parenting teenagers, and they are in schools where they intermingle with the St. Louis City kids. And I love that, and I would hate to see the same school counselors that under this bill would go to jail if they encouraged a child to embrace other options. I would hate to see that come into where my kids are at school today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Carrie. Debbie Jarris.
Hello, I'm Debbie Jarris from Wildwood, Missouri, and I come to you today in my request to not restrict reparative therapy. And I do that based on my research. Dr. Miroslav Jordovic, he is a world premier genital reconstruction surgeon. He has, over the last 5 years, been overwhelmed by the number of people who've approached him about reversing their procedure. The surgery that they thought would bring them satisfaction they were looking for only plunged them into deeper despair. He tells them that a number of them are miserable, they have crippling levels of depression and intense suicidal thoughts. He goes on to say there seems to be a lack of psychiatric evaluation and counseling for those struggling. Even worse, he points out that advocating surgery for younger children is a mistake, he insists. He said the research bears that out. The American College of Pediatricians have pointed out that, according to the DSM-5, as many as 98% of gender-confused boys and 88% of gender-confused girls eventually accept their biological sex. The rush to transition on the part of many with gender dysphoria, especially minors and their medical enablers, can only have tragic consequences. Even the American Psychiatric Association acknowledges that among children with gender dysphoria, the majority do not grow up to identify as transgender. What people need more than anything is the help that too many states want to deny them, the advice and comfort of a qualified therapist. So many of these issues are emotional and mental. I have a report from the DSM Access on psychiatric comorbidities for patients with gender dysphoria. They report 19 different comorbidities for gender dysphoric children, including also behavior addictions and social contagion. In a 2009 study of the Department of Psychology at the Case Western Reserve University, researchers found that most people struggling in this lifestyle, 90%, had at least one other significant form of psychopathy. And that needs to be addressed. We need to have therapists that can deal with the trauma that has happened in their lives. The suicide rate for people who have transitioned is 19 times higher than the population as well. Real compassion is helping people find their way to freedom and fulfillment, which is coming to know the truth. I have a testimony from a lady, her name is Crash, and also I have several books of people who have detransitioned, people that have, I'll just give you Crash's testimony. She had gone to a therapist that affirmed her. And she said when she realized that after she transitioned from female to male, that she detransitioned, and she said she now understands to accept herself as a woman. She has more satisfaction now. She understands her transition and transgender identity as coping mechanisms for dealing with traumatic events.
Debbie, thank you for being here today. We're trying to limit testimony. Thank you for coming before us. We have our did you want to add a couple of additional words? I hated to cut you off.
I just wanted to say that she, although she doesn't blame her therapist for what she did, they affirmed her and to go forward, and she has now mutilated her body and done other things to her mentally because of having counsel to go forward, where she was not addressed with the problems in her life that caused her to think she was transgender. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Abigail, were you wanting to speak as well? Okay.
I'm Abigail Jarrist from Wildman, Missouri. I'm speaking on behalf of Amanda Smith, who submitted her testimony. She is the Community Outreach Coordinator at Desert Stream Ministries, as was before mentioned. She writes, I value the dignity and worth of each human being. I am against all forms of abuse, manipulation, or coercion. I think if practitioners use these tactics, complaints should be filed against them, and the appropriate reprimand should be administered. I am not aware of any therapists who have been named or have had ethical complaints made against them. When I was 15, I identified as a lesbian. I started morphing into a masculine version of myself and presenting that to the world. I wore things to conceal that I was a woman. I often thought that God made a mistake when he made me a woman. All of that started to change when I surrendered to my life to Jesus Christ 12 years ago. It has been my faith in God, good pastoral care, and good talk therapy that has helped me work through the roots of the conflicts I had with my gender. None of this therapy was abusive. I often wonder what pain I would have avoided if I had received therapy of this nature as a teenager or even younger, as it was then when these conflicts began. For me and for many others I know, embracing a gay identity and a masculine self was not helpful. Using therapy bans to influence public belief is an unconstitutional viewpoint and discrimination. Recently, a similar ban in Tampa, Florida, was struck down by a federal judge. Today, I live a life of purpose, joy, and freedom. I did not find that freedom in trying to be the opposite gender. By passing this ban, you are telling parents and minors that their only choice is to embrace gay or transgender identity. In doing so, you are trying to force others to live by a particular viewpoint, forcing them to abandon their values that are formed by their faith and biology. Please don't impose this ban on the therapists and the people in the city of St. Louis. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. That concludes our public testimony. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. This is clearly a topic which people feel passionately about. We had several speakers here today speaking on both sides. I would like to point out that not a single member of the audience who spoke opposed to the bill resides within city limits, but we do appreciate people from the outer region coming into the city to weigh in on laws that impact city residents. With that, I did have one question of clarification, a couple questions for the sponsor, and then I'll open it up to the committee. Alderwoman Ingrassia, does this bill prevent the disclosure of any risks associated with promiscuous sexual behavior in any way, shape, or form? Does it prevent the disclosure of just general health risks associated with?
It does not.
Okay. Does this bill require that anybody be put in prison for anything?
Does not require it, no.
Does what are the enforcement mechanisms here? Can you describe that so we have some clarification?
Sure. So complaints and concerns will go through the health department, and there's a penalty for violation of a fine not more than $500 or up to 90 days in jail.
Okay. With that, I'd like to open up for any additional questions from members of the committee. Alderwoman Tyus.
I listened to a lot of pain as people testified. I did say earlier, I'm one of 30 first cousins. One person died of AIDS because he hid his gayness. I have another first cousin who came out and cried and went to church and said he didn't want to be gay. Came out to our family. I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, he has settled in and accepted his gayness. My family has accepted it. We're working class people. And I refer to some of my uncles hunt and fish, and so they have been the most supportive people I've seen. When I say it is who you are. I can't imagine if my parents would try to take me and decide that I wasn't black, and they tried to convert me to not being black. I just cannot understand it. So when I hear people wanting to convert people from who they are, it's very painful. I know as parents you want your kids to fit into a certain box, but they just don't always do that. And so I'm real proud of my family, and a shout out to the Tyus family because they learned that the hard way. And so we encompass the people that are gay in our family, and we love them and we support them. And that's what I wish for those of you who are in pain, is that you love and support your family so that you don't have to lose a family member that was so ashamed of who he was that he had to hide himself. So I'm sorry for your pain, but my cousin who is gay was like, I don't have any children, but he's young enough to be my child, and the pain that he went through and scared that his family wasn't going to support him, that we would reject him, still makes me tear up. And so I hope you will find some comfort in learning how to support your family members of who they are, whatever part of this that they are. Please add my name to your board bill.
Thank you.
I have no further statements.
Okay. Thank you, Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Green.
I just want to say thank you for bringing forth this bill. One of my best friends in high school grew up in the Church of Latter-day Saints and was fearful for our entire high school years about his family finding out that he was gay. And they found out upon graduation and sent him into conversion therapy for almost 2 years. And he tried to kill himself. And so I think so many of us know stories of people who have been harmed by so-called conversion therapy. And I just want to say that I know a lot of my constituents really appreciate this bill, and a lot of us sitting here really appreciate this bill. And we know that there will probably be court challenges like there have been, with other things that we've done in the city that have challenged kind of status quo beliefs. But we need to do this because our society needs to recognize all people for who they are. So thank you for your work in this. Thank you to Promo for your work in this, not just here, but across the state. And hopefully that, knowing if we pass this, followed, following in the footsteps of Columbia and Kansas City passes this, that we're sending a very strong message to the state about where the major economic centers, the major population centers of our state stand when it comes to protecting our LGBTQIA community. So thank you.
Thank you for your support.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Thank you. I also just want to express my gratitude for you bringing this bill forward. And I think one of the things that I think is important in this bill is it doesn't prevent anybody from getting counseling or therapy around these issues. What we're saying is a particular type of treatment. And I think we have all sorts of regulations and laws in this state that protect our children from a variety of, there are all sorts of medical procedures that we don't let children get. And I think, so I don't see this as limiting freedom, I think, in some of the ways that other people might. I think what we're doing is saying that we're going to proactively protect our children. So again, so thank you for bringing this forward. And I know on behalf of my constituents that I've heard from, they're grateful that we're taking this step. So thank you.
Alderwoman Rice.
Thank you. Just wanted to make a note. Did some research looking at the Tampa City court case, and the court did not rule on the constitutionality of the city's ordinance that prohibited conversion therapy. Instead, it found the state's healthcare regulations prevented the municipality from regulating this type of counseling, and that is specific to Florida state law. There is another court case in Maryland where a federal judge dismissed the lawsuit that was enacting a statewide ban in Maryland. So of those two court cases that were mentioned earlier, I just wanted to discuss that those challenges were not on constitutional grounds or that have not been upheld on that. So, whether this comes up against specific Missouri law is something that we will see going forward. But I do also want to thank you for bringing the bill. I want to thank everyone for their testimony today. I think that these are deeply significant issues. And when it comes to beliefs, when it comes to historical and cultural norms, and just the identity, people's individual identities and their daily lived realities. And I think that affirming the worth of each individual person as they are is incredibly important. And if we can save lives by preventing a harmful practice, this specific harmful practice. We're not saying that children who are questioning cannot access therapy that allows them to receive guidance and help on that, but conversion therapy has a specific goal in mind, and it is to set a specific path in front of a child, and that is what we are saying no to, because just as we don't force children to choose a profession going forward, something that is not an immutable characteristic, we shouldn't be forcing children to deny themselves at this point. These points in their lives. And so just again, if there are ways that we can save lives, we can understand that lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual children are worthy exactly as they are, then I'm very much in support of that. So thank you very much for bringing that.
Thank you.
Alderman Todd.
Thank you very much, Alderwoman, for bringing this bill forward. I have a granddaughter who is lesbian, and the best therapy that we found for her is to fully accept her, not to tolerate her, and to make a choice about our own sexuality. Thank you very much again for bringing the bill forward.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Tice, did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, I'm done because I'm weepy.
Thank you, Alderwoman Ingrassia. I too share gratitude and the bravery involved in bringing this forward. There has been some confusion here today. I want to read a statement by the American Academy of Pediatrics, because I think something that has become clear from the number of people here in this room is that mental health is important to everyone here. Everyone here is weighing in on a therapeutic issue, an issue regarding a specific type of therapy that is offered. And I don't think anybody here is suggesting that we don't address mental health issues in some meaningful way, and that therapy can be very helpful. But the American Academy of Pediatrics is weighing in on conversion therapy, which is a specific type of therapy designed to reorient someone's sexual orientation. And I think this is important to note. Therapy directed specifically at changing sexual orientation is contraindicated since it can provoke guilt and anxiety while having little or no potential for achieving changes in orientation. You know, I think recognizing that therapy is an important piece of being human and dealing with struggles of all different kinds. I think we're all very sensitive to that, and this isn't in any way, shape, or form saying that we don't want people to seek out and get help that they may need for lots of different human struggles that we all experience on a regular basis. But participating in a type of therapy that has proven to be very harmful to children is, I think, something that we're really grateful for your efforts in moving forward. With that, I'll take a motion on Board Bill 52.
Bill 152. Thank you. I move that Board Bill 152 be passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Second. Alderman Todd, did you have something to add?
No.
Did you want to second the bill? Or-
I wanted to second it.
Okay, thank you. And with that,
Can I make a motion for previous rule?
hearing no objection, with previous rule, Board Bill 152 passes out of the Health and Human Services Committee unanimously with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you so much.
And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
You want to keep this?
Yes.